This is Fans Football Now on the FanStream Sports Channel, powered by DSP Media. I'm Jeff Thidahl. Follow me on Twitter at ThatHappens. He's Chad Rink. Follow him on Twitter at Ocho Rinko. A lot to get into today. Chad, latest news coming out of the Giants' backfield is Saquon Barkley said that he may sit out. He's kind of threatening-ish to sit out games if the Giants and he can't come to some kind of a different deal, because the long-term deal deadline is passed. All he can do is enhance a one-year deal. He can do a one-year deal for more money with like a promise they wouldn't tag him next year or anything like that. So, but that's the only thing he can really do right now as far as a deal goes. So Barkley's saying he may sit out if he doesn't get what he wants. And they went out and signed James Robinson. Robinson, formerly of the Jaguars and the Jets. Patriots signed him a 2-year deal in March, and then they cut him. Barkley's somebody who a lot of people look at as one of the top running backs available this year if he's healthy. Number one for me, though. But if you're a Barkley owner in a dynasty league, how worried should you be?
Somewhat worried, probably on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 5. I don't know if he will sit out, but just that chance that he pulls a Le'Veon Bell and misses games, it's huge on dynasty. On redraft, he's going mid-first, so he may end up dropping to the second. So he could be a value in redraft if he does sit out or even threatens to sit out and even misses like training camps and preseason games. He could be behind the 8 ball there first couple games. Robinson going there is interesting because he's still relatively young. He has been productive. Just depending on that injury, now he's going to be a couple years removed from that. So I think it's a good signing for the Giants as a team if Barkley does sit, and it just gives them an extra running back. But I think if Barkley's there, Robinson's just more of a handcuff than anything else.
It's interesting, the Barkley thing. It reminds me of, and it's not quite on this level just because the Giants haven't done a lot in the playoffs, but when Emmitt Smith wanted a new deal from Jerry Jones, and after they won the Super Bowl, he sat out the next year to start the season. And he said, I'm sitting out till I get what I want. And he missed the first 2 games. I mean, the first game was like a Monday night game against Washington, I think. And then he sat out the second game. They went 0-2 to start the season. Jerry Jones said, okay, fine, uncle, we'll sign you. They signed him for the deal he wanted, and they came back and won the Super Bowl then that year. I don't think it's the Giants, though. If they start off 0-2 or something like that and Barkley's not playing, that puts a lot of leverage in his corner. Likewise, if they start off 2-0 and Robinson plays great while Barkley's out, all of a sudden Barkley loses all this leverage. So it's an interesting dynamic there if he does.
Yeah, it is.
And
again, it's all going to be if the Giants win, what they look like without him. Dable is a good enough coach. I think they can make it work. But Barkley is so much better than James Robinson, I think. So it's just one of those weird cat and mouse things where I don't know who's calling the shots there, because if you're Dable, you're like, hey, do what we can to get Barkley in, because I think they have a pretty solid team. I think anyone in the NFC not named the Eagles are kind of not going to the Super Bowl. So we'll see. But like Barkley makes a huge difference. But I understand him sitting out. And why not? If he sits out a couple games, they look bad. He's got the leverage. He gets a little bit extra rest on his body. So it's not a bad play for Barkley, and especially if you can miss OTAs and those types of things where the veterans don't like going to anyways.
And then another sign today, the Ravens. I can't get the Ravens. I don't understand. They've got a bunch of running backs already. You've got a quarterback who can run. I know you're going to pass more than you normally do. And they go out and get Melvin Gordon for 1 year and $3.1 million. Gordon, to me, is washed, isn't he?
Yeah, I think. I mean, if you're going to get anybody, I guess because he was cheap. I mean, if you're going to get another running back, get Kareem Hunt or somebody. But I don't know. I don't know if they just don't. They know something about Dobbins that. I mean, he looked decent when he came back. He had a weird hitch when he was running, but he looked good. I like Dobbins. I mean, I think he could be the guy. Gus Edwards has proven he can be a nice change of pace kind of, bull kind of back. He's decent. I think it's just more of a Ravens, like, let's just bring in guys, have extra guys out here. Gordon, I guess, can still be somewhat helpful. But it doesn't do anything. It just messes things up for fantasy wise. I think it might be a good move for the Ravens, who don't really care about fantasy. They're just really about winning football games. That organization has proven time and time again they make smart moves. Why not as a third down, as a third back? He could be worse than Melvin Gordon. I mean, I doubt he's going to play much though, unless there's just serious injuries.
And it just tells me they're not completely confident in the health of Dobbins and Edwards, and Dobbins is going into a contract year also. Which gives Dobbins every incentive to play, even if he's a little bit hurt. It gives him every incentive to do that since he is coming into a contract year now. It puzzled me a little bit when I saw that. But I want to get some of the the quarterbacks, Chad, the new quarterbacks and new situations, and kind of we can run through some of these. There's a lot of new starting quarterbacks in new places. We'll start with the Jets, who obviously got Aaron Rodgers there, and the big deal they made with them. And obviously the comparison is going to be a lot more talent in Tampa Bay than Rodgers has with the Jets. That being said, Rodgers had an awful year fantasy-wise last. I don't know if he's a top 10 quarterback this year, With all the guys that have come up, I'm not sure if Aaron Rodgers is top 10 this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as a Bears fan, I'm glad he's out of the NFC North. I mean, just get out of there. But I think if he was a free agent, I think Tampa could have been in play, but there's no way Green Bay is sending him in the NFC to try to face him. So I think the Jets for him was probably the best place to go to try to win a Super Bowl. That defense is elite. They have talent, young talent. I think their coaching staff is pretty top notch too. I just don't think he's going to be worth a fantasy, even a dart throw, really. I just don't think he's going to put up the type of numbers. He can't run that you're going to need. I mean, he not even as a flex position either.
What I think we'll end up seeing more of Aaron Rodgers is obviously not the great numbers, but as far as like on the football side of things, I think he may evolve into more of a game manager in some situations, to where it's more to not lose the game and let the defense hopefully play well for them, but do what he needs to when it's necessary. But I don't see him posting huge fantasy numbers this year. You've got Deshaun Watson now for a full year in Cleveland. Not a new starting quarterback, but he's a different quarterback than they had week 1 last year on the field. It's been a while since we've seen Deshaun get a full season in. And back before all the stuff happened, he was an elite fantasy quarterback. I think he's somebody you can get at value in a draft. I think you can get a good value on Deshaun Watson because the Browns are still they look like more of a running team with Nick Chubb, and they've got some receivers, but they're not elite proven receivers as a core. Obviously you've got Amari Cooper there and whatnot. But it's not like you've got a top end receiver that everyone fears.
Right. Yeah, I think he's a huge value. Like I said, he's proved himself over the past years that he is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Side note, I actually saw his first game ever starting against Cincinnati on a Thursday night. So I didn't think he was going to be any good because he looked horrible that game. He had that one good 48-yard run, and I was like, I don't know if this guy's going to be any good. Then he ended up being okay. So I think he's a good value. I think the Browns may throw the ball more just because I think they could be down, and I you still have Chubb, but I think they're going to try to maybe throw the ball a little bit more. But like you said, they don't have the top end receivers, so I don't know what that's going to look like. He'll have a couple 300-yard games. He ran the ball a lot last year too, so he still has that going there. But I think if you miss out on the top 5 quarterbacks, then you get into the Lawrence, Herbert, and then it kind of drops off where you're just sitting there like Tua, Cousins, those type of guys. Watson's not a bad, and he seems to be going off in around the quarterback 8-10 off the board. So, but he's not going off to at least round 8, 9, 10 in most of the mock drafts. So he's a great value. And I think people are just, kind of sour on him just because of last year and some of the off-field stuff.
Indianapolis is not going to start Anthony Richardson week 1, I wouldn't believe. I got to believe they Gardner Minshew in there and let Richardson kind of ease into it. But either way, if it's Richardson or Minshew, Richardson obviously has value because he can run the ball. but neither one are viable options for me right now in a redraft league. Obviously, if you're in a dynasty league, I think Richardson's got some value long term, but I don't see the first few weeks of the season either one of those guys being guys that you want anywhere near your starting lineup.
No, I think you're right. Unless they just want to throw Richardson in there, Minshew knows the offense being there in Philly with Steichen. So I think, and he shows he can be serviceable and let Richardson kind of run the offense. But I imagine come week 3, they're just going to throw him in, give him a couple weeks to learn the offense. But he's really more of if it's a redraft, a late stash, just because late in the year, he's gonna be starting, and he's huge upside with the rushing. I mean, you look what Fields did last year. Fields was horrible first half of the year, and then all of a sudden he just took off, and he was huge. So Richardson has that ability in that Steichen offense where, Hurts had like 60, like inside the 20 carries last year. So they used him a ton in the red zone and even inside the 5. And you got Taylor there to kind of, keep him honest. But he's just more of a late stash in the redraft leagues. Dynasty, I took him in our league at the 6th pick just because he's got the upside. I don't think he's got all the tools to make it happen long term. But he's got the athleticism. So if he can, figure out how to throw a touch pass and those types of things, he could be that Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields type guy where he's not going to throw a ton, but the legs are huge for the first few years, and then just trade him after 3 years.
Well, that's going to be interesting about it too. Is that you get a situation where, and we've seen teams recently do this, where you get a quarterback on a rookie contract, and you can use your cap money elsewhere then. And you see the Bengals have done it. You saw the Eagles doing that, where you can spend your money on the quarterback, draft a quarterback, get him on the rookie deal, and then for the next few years build around him, and then just figure out the salary thing later, which is why if the dynasty part of Richardson is if the Colts are smart and build around him. It's got some, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville is another example of somebody who they took advantage of the fact that he was a cheap option for them, who produces big numbers. Speaking of quarterbacks, go to Houston now, but I know you've got, not the greatest offensive weapons around either. Nico Collins is there. That's one of the guys that's there. But Stroud's going to be a learning curve for him as well. And so, again, dynasty-wise, I'm all about it. But in a redraft league, Stroud doesn't have the pull for me.
No, I don't think any of the rookie quarterbacks really in redraft leagues should be drafted, and they may just be later waiver wire pickups. Like you said, Houston, they don't have the weapons around them. I think they're going to just try to run. New coaching staffs, we don't even know what kind of play calling they're going to do, and they're not ready to compete. So I look at Stroud as a guy where he's probably not even going to crack the top 20 most weeks in fantasy. I mean, he may have a week where he, ends up throwing 3 touchdowns and close to 300, but I would stay away from all the rookie running backs in redraft leagues. Richardson would be the only one just because of his running ability. But yeah, Stroud, I like him as a actual quarterback to try to win games there. I think it was smart going defense first, but fantasy wise, it's going to probably at least be a couple years. So redraft leagues, I wouldn't touch them. Same with Bryce Young.
Moving down over to Las Vegas now with Jimmy Garoppolo there taking the reins, signed the contract, and then the news came out the possible foot injury, or foot surgery he had, and could he end up being ready to start? All signs are pointing to Garoppolo being ready to go. You've still got Devontae Adams there, but who wasn't real happy with the direction of the offense, it sounds like, in the offseason, where they were going with it. Josh Jacobs may or may not be on the field. They traded away Darren Waller. Garoppolo, bye-week fill-in at best. I'm not going to spend any draft capital on Jimmy Garoppolo, even with an elite receiver like Devontae Adams out there.
I totally agree. Like, I think he was a downgrade from Carr. And like you said, they've got less weapons now this year. I'm not a big fan of Josh McDaniels as a head coach anyway. So, and they're in that division where they're the fourth best team in that division. So, it's just one of those where he's not even really even on my radar. A fill in on a bye week, or, if a matchup looks good. Like you said, need someone to fill in, but that's it. I'm not touching him at all this year.
Washington, I mean, who the hell knows what's going to go on in Washington this year? They keep saying Sam Howell's going to get every opportunity to start, which I don't think is a great thing. They've underutilized having Terry McLaurin there as an option, having Curtis Samuel there as an option. Those guys have not been utilized the way they should have been. Now you also have Jahan Dotson out there as well. So it's going to be Sam Howell. They got Jacoby Brissett, who, again, game manager type person. But, I don't know. Obviously, neither one's going to draft Sam Howell, but how much are we going to penalize the wide receivers for that? Like, McLaurin's played well with bad quarterbacks or inconsistent quarterbacks already, but Samuel hasn't really gotten in a groove and can't stay healthy, it seems like. Don was great at the end of last year, but who the hell knows what's going to happen with Washington this year?
Yeah, it's such a sad situation because you throw any competent quarterback in there, like the Dotson and McLaurin look really good because they got a good run game, they got a good defense. I think Brissett will probably win that job. I mean, I have no clue about how, but I think McLaurin and Dotson, I think, are just late round flyers, but I think their ceiling's probably like 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. I just don't think Washington's going to score a ton, and they may run the ball once they get in the red zone. So again, I'm like, I think they're the fourth best team in the Division II, and I just don't know. So, McLaurin and Dotson have the talent. So if you're taking flyers, always take flyers on talent. But I don't know.
Let's slide over to Green Bay then, and you've got Jordan Love there, who's kind of the Stetson Bennett of the NFL. The old guy who's just now starting because he's had to sit behind Aaron Rodgers for so long. And they've got good young receivers, but again, we haven't seen much out of Jordan Love. And I certainly like him better than the last couple of quarterbacks we mentioned. I like him better than Garoppolo. I'd rather have Jordan Love on my team than Garoppolo. Rather have him than whoever's playing quarterback for Washington. But again, not a ton of confidence yet until we see him in action. And we're not going to know in preseason because preseason's not going to show us anything. It's going to be like that. That's why another guy, if you're going to draft him, it's got to be late as hell in your draft if you're going to take him.
Yeah, I think he's one of the ones where if you talk about new quarterbacks that aren't rookies in new positions, he's probably the best of them just because of the talent around him. He showed some life last year when he played. He's been in that system for a while. And Green Bay seems to just put these guys out. But again, I don't see him really being a top 15 guy. There's just too many other good quarterbacks out there. But I do like him probably best of all the quarterbacks in new positions are getting the start. So again, if you're punting or you just, super flex, he's, kind of a later guy, but redraft too is like, I wouldn't even draft him. Draft one quarterback. There's plenty of others if you want to go two, and then maybe you don't want to waste a roster spot on 3 quarterbacks in a redraft league. So unless you have like Mahomes and then you just punt on quarterback till really late, and then maybe backing up a guy like Mahomes or something. But I do think overall he could be pretty solid. But a team going from Favre to Rodgers and now Love, I think they're finally going to take a step back at that quarterback room. He does have a lot of any of the quarterbacks, I think, of not getting benched of any of these other quarterbacks we've talked about.
Head down to the NFC South. They've got 3 new starting quarterbacks in there, it looks like, with Tampa Bay, Carolina, New Orleans all employing new ones. We've talked about the rookie quarterback thing. Same thing applies to Bryce Young. Wait and see on him in a redraft league. Go get him in a dynasty league. But talking about Tampa Bay now, it looks look, I think Baker Mayfield will be the starter there week one. I can't see them starting Kyle Trask out of Florida. I don't think that'll be an option for them. I think Baker Mayfield will be there. He does have great weapons, and Mayfield did give the Rams a bit of a charge when he first came out there. Struggled down the stretch than the last couple of games when he filled in for Stafford, but still not a believer in Mayfield. There's a reason why he's bounced around so much in the last couple of years. So I don't have high expectations there. And again, I'm going to temper my enthusiasm on the receivers in Tampa for the same reasons.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of like Baker this year just because of the weapons he has, and that division's kind of bad. And I think that what they're going to try to do is dump down a lot. If you look at what Leonard Fournette was third in receptions by running backs last year, just behind Eckler and McCaffrey. He had 73. Rachaad White had 50. So they had 123 receptions between the two last year. So I think that's what they're going to do a lot. Have Baker dump down. You've got Evans, who's just solid. Godwin's good if he's coming back from the injury. So I think Baker can be serviceable. But again, there are 15 other quarterbacks I think I'd rather have. But Baker's interesting just because I think he's kind of be more of like a DFS kind of guy to kind of he could be a cheap guy for you if you're playing DFS. Not a bad second quarterback to have, especially if you're doing super flex. Because I think he can put up some numbers. Like you said, he looked good with the Rams last year early. I think he's a serviceable guy, right. And he brings a spark to teams. And I think there's enough talent there where in a bad division they can win some games. But I think he could get some cheap yardage just with some of these dump down passes to Rachaad White.
I think I like the next guy more than any other quarterback in the division this year is Derek Carr in New Orleans with the receiving weapons they have. If Michael Thomas, if can't guard Mike, can finally play, and he's on a reduced contract that he renegotiated, so he's got incentive to do well and be out there. And obviously Chris Olave, had a great year last year as well. And I think Carr's problems last year, I don't think were Carr. I think they were Josh McDaniels. I'm with you on the first, not believing in Josh McDaniels. He's a really good offensive mind, but he's not a good head coach. And it seems like you saw the struggles he had in Denver when he was the head coach there for that hot minute. It seems like nothing's changed for him. So I think Carr could be in line for a big year this year. I don't as my starter, but I would love to have Carr as my number 2 quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of all the guys we talk about, he's probably number 1 and number 1 by a lot, just because, like you said, if Mike Thomas can come back, Olave, I don't know Kamara's situation, but he'll be back at some point. But I think that defense is good, and I think that's a defense. Right. Like you look at who they're playing, it's ridiculous. Like the quarterbacks they play this year, like they could just be turnover crazy. So, and Carr's good. I think he's a good quarterback. And I think he's good enough to win you games. And he, like I said, he's got the weapons around him. He's smart, and he doesn't try to do too much. And so again, with the newer offensive system and stuff, we'll see how he fits in. But I think if Thomas and Olave, the former Buckeyes, are both back healthy, I think he's got better weapons this year than he did last year, even with Waller and Adams.
Yeah, and Waller missed some time last year again too. That's what it was. And the Alvin Kamara thing. I think that the talk is now he'll probably get 2 to 4 games, like in that range. And if it's beginning of the season, that's fine. Because you can get Kamara later in drafts probably then, and maybe stash him and play for the title. And we'll just do a quick tip here, something that I always do, and you can refute it if you want. But before we get out of here, we'll save the ADP stuff for the next episode. But when I'm drafting, I don't base everything on the playoff schedule for my leagues, but if I'm between 2 guys, if there's 2 guys I'm looking at, and I feel better about one guy's schedule in the last few weeks, that would break the tie for me in that situation, something like that. So if it's close, I look at that because it's a little tougher in dynasty leagues, but in redraft leagues, like I've always got the expectation I'm going to be in the playoffs, even though I'm not all the time. Most of the time I am, but I've always got that expectation when I'm drafting. So I use it to break ties. I don't just base it solely on that. But that's where I think that I might get some value out of Kamara in redraft leagues if he is announced to be suspended the first couple of games.
Yeah, I agree because he's a talent. They only drafted that Kendre Miller, so I think he's solid, but he's not Kamara. And then you got Kamara coming in fresh. I'm always interested on the strength of schedule because you never know at the beginning of the year what the strength of schedule is going to be because you got teams that end up being better than you thought they were defensively. But that's always like one to look at. But again, I'm always like draft talent and draft on teams that you think are going to score. And I think the Saints can move the ball and score. You know how they use Kamara, and like again, especially if you're in a PPR league. He's going to be huge, even if he does miss 6 games. That's one of those things. If you have a team that's good and you get a guy like that comes back, later in the season, it just kind of gives your whole team a boost.
Right.
So if you can weather that storm, and there's enough good, decent running backs that you can, fill that in for Kamara. But I think he's being one of those guys when he comes back, he's going to be the bell cow. I just don't think they're going to use Kendre Miller a ton. Unless he just happens to look ridiculous when he's playing. But Kamara's a nice sneaky guy that you can get late. I haven't really been paying too much attention with him where he's falling in these redraft mocks that I've been doing. He's just one of those guys I don't really pay attention where he's at. But I know it's later on, like probably 7th round or later.
Yeah. And that's certainly that's somebody we'll keep an eye on too. And I'll knock out a couple of mock drafts as well. You keep doing your 14 a day that you're doing, and then
here's a guy.
We reconvene on here. We can kind of give some of the things that we're seeing, some of the trends, and
that'll work.
We can do that next.
Here's a guy. Just real quick, your thoughts on if he starts week 1, Brock Purdy.
So, all right, we'll do that. Yeah, good. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Go ahead and say it again.
Oh, yeah. Your thoughts real quick. Brock Purdy, if he's starting week 1, where's he falling as quarterback? He looked good last year, and they put up some points when he played.
Again, they did.
He's got all the talent around him.
He does. He does. Yeah, Purdy could certainly be an interesting option to have, and I think that when he gets the opportunity, he plays well when he gets the opportunities like that. So, and he's a guy who can fit into almost any system, I think, as well. So, yeah, Purdy's a guy who I would, if it's announced if he's going to start, I would certainly consider him as my backup quarterback, not as my starter, but I'd take him as a high backup in that car range, also. All right, so next time we will hit more at ADP stuff. We'll talk about so where we are seeing guys fall to, values that we see that we like that are out there right now. Of course, we'll get you updated on all the news going on in the fantasy football world, the NFL world, as it all pertains as we're getting closer and closer to the start of most drafts for people. So, Chad, thanks. Follow him on Twitter at Chad Ochorinco. Follow me on Twitter at FitHappens, and we will talk to you again very soon. I promise.